Hi guys, happy Canada Day. I'm Tim Moen, leader of the Libertarian Party of Canada. Today I'm going to be celebrating Canada and feeling grateful with my family. We're going to grill up some stuff on the barbecue. We're going to maybe go watch the Canada Day parade. We're going to go watch some fireworks later. We're just going to celebrate Canada in unison with a bunch of other Canadians and feel good about the fact that we live in this country. And I hope you celebrate Canada too in your own way today. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that have been rolling around in my head over the past few days leading up to Canada Day. And, I've been thinking about all the things that I'm grateful for. And I just want to say a few words about gratitude because I feel I'm careful about using the word pride or feeling proud. I think most people, when they say pride or proud, they mean something like I do when I say I'm really grateful for living here. But I'm really careful to use it. Maybe it's my Christian upbringing. And, there's that verse in the Bible that says pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before the fall. And I think there's a bit of truth in that, right? In that feelings of pride can lead to destruction. It can lead to a fall. I think the least bad form of pride is feeling pride in your own individual accomplishments, right? This feeling of satisfaction that you have achieved something. But I think if that satisfaction or that pride is sustained, if you feel it for a little bit too long, it can lead to stagnation. And I'm a firm believer that if you're not growing, if you rest on your laurels, you're dying. But if you have a growth mindset, if you're constantly looking for that next opportunity, then you're growing and you're becoming better. You're achieving more liberty. So I worry about using words like pride. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm being a little bit too semantic here or something like that. But I do think it's important. I think the worst form of pride is feeling some sense of satisfaction about what someone else accomplished, right? So I would never want to feel proud about the Toronto Raptors winning the NBA championships. I feel incredibly happy for those people. I get inspired when I watch them because, look, they worked really hard and they achieved something great. And I had absolutely nothing to do with that. And so I worry about if I use phrases like, yeah, we won the championship. Well, we didn't win anything because I had nothing to do with that. I was sitting at home eating McDonald's and not going to the gym 3 times a day, and sacrificing everything for an achievement. So I don't want to feel proud about that, if that makes any sense. And why I'm talking about this, guys, is, that there's this idea of national pride that bothers me a little bit. I think usually people mean that they feel grateful, but I think there's a slippery slope and there's a gray area there where it slides over into this sense that I personally had something to do with Canada being such a great country. And I think that causes us to rest on our laurels. I think it causes us to get conceited. And I think it causes us to potentially lose the sacrifice and the work that our ancestors have done. I mean, they're the ones that should feel some sense of satisfaction for what they accomplished. We can certainly be grateful for taking on that mantle and having the privilege of living where we're living because of what our ancestors have done. But as soon as we rest on that privilege and on that and we have pride in it or something like that, I feel like it's in jeopardy of falling. And I see evidence of that around. So I just want to talk about what I'm really grateful for, not what I'm really proud about. Because if I talk about what I'm grateful for, I feel like that will cause me to really cherish those things, to fight for those things, to work for those things, to build on those things. Whereas I feel pride causes me to kind of rest on my laurels, or at worst, rest on the laurels of other people on accomplishments I had nothing to do with at all. I want to build on the accomplishments of my ancestors. I want to cherish what they've done. I want to honor it. I want to hold it as sacred, and I want to build on it and create something for my children so that they can continue and be grateful for what I've done, if that makes any sense. All right, so all that is a long way of saying, look, I'm really grateful that we live in a country that was rooted in the principles of individual liberty. You know, ever since the Magna Carta, I think that human history and human civilization has taken a giant step forward. No longer were people organized around the idea of group identity or collectives, but we were now orbiting this idea of the individual, and we were connected together as individuals. And this was very powerful. I mean, this led to the idea that government ought to be restrained, and its proper role ought to be to protect the individual, not infringe on it. And as a result, we had free markets and division of labor and international trade, and all this has led to great prosperity on every metric of human flourishing. Everything has been lifted up, and it all started with the idea of the individual as the sacrosanct unit of society, not groups. The other thing I'm grateful for is that my great-grandparents had the courage and the foresight to flee Stalinist Russia, and they didn't just flee to anywhere. They fled to a country, Canada, that had not any kind of handouts. They weren't offering anything for free, but they were a haven where you could find individual liberty, where individual liberty was protected, and they knew that there wasn't going to be some collectivist, patriarchal monster trying to infringe and impose his will on them. And you know, they came to Canada and they lived in a wooden grain bin. I think there was 8 of them, and they, you know, they relied on some charity from others. They built up. They started planting crops in ditches because they couldn't afford to buy any land, and they just started hustling, and they started working, and they started charting their own destiny. You know, no handouts from the government. They built up a life for themselves. They built up a great prosperity for their children and then their grandchildren. And I'm very grateful for that. They fled, you know, here's the thing. They fled a collectivist state, a collectivist nation. They hacked out of the Russian wilderness a homestead and started planting crops, and they became a very prosperous family. And the communists, you know, I remember reading my great-grandfather's memoirs. He talks about the rise of communism, right? And how insidious it is, and how it seems like such a great idea, right? This noble intention. And it seemed to jibe well with his Mennonite Christian sensibilities, that this idea about sharing, right? That if you had more, that you would share it with other people. And that's kind of how communism was sold. And so it seemed like kind of a good idea to him at the time. But then they just kept wanting more and more. And these were people that weren't working as hard as he and his family were. And, you know, he gave up more and more. But eventually it was too much. It was to the point where they were starving. They were branded kulaks, right? So that now they're placed in a group identity called kulak or bourgeois. And now they're the enemy. And guys started coming around with guns and putting guns on the table, and the secret police and all these young people, you know, in their late teens, early 20s, saw an opportunity to grab stuff, right? And grab the hard work of others, and they could be prosperous if they just stole that stuff, right? And so they glommed onto the communist philosophy very readily. And so this insidious, good-intentioned idea became stark evil. And they barely managed to make it out of the Soviet Union with their lives. They got one of the last passports in St. Petersburg. watched a couple of their kids die from smallpox. It was a horrible thing, and the rest of the family ended up in work camps in Soviet Russia where they died. And so I'm very grateful that they saw the writing on the wall, that they recognized this evil that was coming their way, and they got the hell out of there so that their family could live and find prosperity somewhere else. And so that's why I'm here today. And I worry that Canada might be I hesitate. I don't want to sound like I'm catastrophizing here or anything like that. I think we're a long way off from Soviet Russia. But, I was walking down White Ave in Edmonton yesterday, and I saw this thing someone had written on chalk. Our provincial party here is called the UCP, the United Conservative Party. And they had written UCP on this rock in chalk, and they had used it as an acronym to stand for Unfettered Capitalist Patriarchy. And, you just kind of, and it was near Notley's office, right? Rachel Notley, who's very left-wing NDP, former premier of this province. So I'm guessing it was meant as a insult, not a compliment. But I mean, my grandparents came here for unfettered capitalism, right? They fled patriarchy. I don't know what patriarchy has to do with unfettered capitalism. Archy, or rulers, are the exact opposite of capitalism in my estimation. But they came here because individual rights were respected. And to me, that's what capitalism is. I know other people have different definitions of it that involve state-granted monopolies or something like that. But I mean free markets, capitalism in its true sense, not this kind of propagandized version that the left uses of it. So they came here for unfettered capitalism. But so whoever had written this, I mean, to me, this is like writing a hammer and sickle or a swastika on a thing and using that as some sort of revolutionary symbol, right? It's scary to me that there are young kids out there that have the same mindset as these 20-year-old kids in Stalinist Russia that would come around with guns and demand crops from my great-grandparents who had worked so hard for it. And we now live in North America, in Canada, roughly half of the population lives off of the other half, right? So political violence is a reality here. It's not abstract to say that. The only way we can redistribute wealth by the state is at the point of a gun. So money is taken by taxation and it's redistributed to others. If you don't pay your taxes, there are consequences. It's mandatory. Guys with guns come eventually if you don't pay your taxes, right? You get thrown in jail. You have your possessions taken from you forcibly. You try to protect yourself, you'll get shot down. So this isn't an option. So half of the population is living off the other half of the population. We are collectivizing increasingly into groups, right? And the left is the worst at this, but I see this happening on the right as well. You're either in our group or you're out of our group, right? Your identity is determined by other people, and it could be your ethnic. Maybe you're part of some ethnic group, and when people see your ethnicity, that becomes your ethnic group. Maybe it's more often than not, it's your politics, right? And if you don't fit perfectly in someone's, I was talking with someone who's involved in a Conservative Party riding association here in Alberta, and they were saying how difficult it is to have conversations with fellow Conservatives, because if you say something out of the doctrine, out of the Conservative doctrine, like, hey, maybe we ought to decriminalize drugs or something like that, respect people's individual liberty, well, now you're a leftist, right? Because you have fallen outside of Conservative doctrine, and now you are essentially the enemy. And it's even worse on the left. I mean, if you don't buy this crazy leftist group identity politics, oppression Olympics narrative, whole hog, you're on the outs. I mean, you just have to watch the Democratic debates in the States to see how rampant this was. I mean, one guy was even talking about reproductive rights, abortion rights for trans women, right? People who don't even have uteruses. And if you don't say that, you're on the out group. And so everyone else was clapping and nodding. Everyone's scared shitless of being pushed to the outside and becoming the enemy, because we've lost the plot here in the North. We've lost the plot in Canada. We're all about groups, collectives, identities. Lost is the individual liberty that has built the West, that my great-grandparents fled to for a better life. And, this is why I do what I do in the Libertarian Party of Canada. This is why I sacrifice my career. This is why I sacrifice my pension and sentence myself to work till I die, because I care so much about liberty, about individual liberty, about the idea that government should be restrained and protect the people. I don't think I have the right to squander what my grandparents, what our ancestors, what the people that built this country created, what the Enlightenment philosophers created with this idea that society ought to be centered around individual rights. And so anyways, those are my thoughts on Canada Day. I'm going to try to celebrate and be grateful and not worry about what I think might inevitably happen in Canada. But listen, if you share the same feelings I do, if you worry about the direction of Canada, if you're incredibly grateful for the riches and the prosperity that this country has built based on the idea of individual liberty, join the Libertarian Party of Canada, libertarian.ca, and join with me as we promote the principles that we love that have created Western civilization. Thanks.